One of the most fundamental throws in Ultimate is the backhand, and I'm going to have a tutorial video today talking about how to get started on a backhand. And even if you've been throwing the backhand for a couple of years, you can always go back and learn from the fundamentals, learn from the mechanics, and actually improve your backhand throw. Especially if you've gotten to a point where you're finding that your hucks aren't really going as far as you want them to, or you're having troubles on your pulls and the disc actually going where you want it to. So the first part of the backhand is the grip. There's been a lot of talk about should the finger be on the rim, should it be underneath? And the answer to that is, at least what I think and what most people think, is all the fingers underneath. But I recommend moving away from the power grip. So the power grip is all the fingers underneath like this, curled around tightly, more to a fan grip. So having the fingers splayed out underneath. I find all the fingers underneath causes your hand to actually rotate and that your thumb will slip off. And I like having all the fingers splayed out like that because I find I get a better grip on the disc. I can actually control it a little better, and my index finger will actually curl around a little bit more than the other fingers will. So it's not on the rim, right? That's for push pass, but it's underneath, okay? So once we have the grip down, next step is the other mechanic of the throw, which is the spin. So we want a ton of snap on the disc, and the way that we get the snap is having the proper grip and then making sure that we're snapping our wrist as efficiently as possible and with as much force as possible. So it's almost like if you have something on your finger and you're trying to get it off your finger, right? You're not just doing that, you're lots of snap on that wrist, right? Okay, so think the same thing with the disc, you want to be lots of snap on it. Now the way to get a lot of snap on it is not starting your hand out, bringing it back, and then snapping, right? You'll have it bounce off your arm and you're actually going to lose a lot of power. So what you want to be doing is curling your wrist in as you start, and then as you bring your arm back, you can snap it through. Okay, and that leads me to the mechanics of the throw. Technique and mechanics are different. So technique is how you actually throw the backhand. The mechanics are the different elements that go into the technique. So the mechanics are the same for everybody. Technique will be different for each person depending on your body type, depending on your amount of flexibility, your strength, all that kind of stuff. So the mechanics are, as I mentioned, the grip and the snap. And then now we have to think more about the body and what the body actually does. So in Ultimate, because we have a pivot foot, I'm right-handed, my pivot foot will generally be my left foot. So as I'm throwing a backhand, I'm going to be stepping with my foot. Okay, but what I like to do first is as I'm stepping, I'm actually cocking my wrist first. Okay? So like I mentioned, grip, cock your wrist, and then as I step out, my arm starts to come back. Okay, you'll see my elbows bent a little bit. I'm not keeping this straight arm. Bent a little bit. As I step out, I'm bringing everything back. I'm turning my shoulders, turning my hips. And then I do the opposite. So if the first thing I do is cock the wrist back, the last thing I'm going to do is snap it forwards. Okay, the very last thing I'm doing is snapping that wrist to get a ton of snap, ton of spin on the disc. That's how it's going to go somewhere. Okay, so as I step out, snap forwards. Okay, this arm is going to support my throwing arm. So as I'm throwing, I'm not holding it by my side. It's actually moving at the same motion as my throwing arm is. That helps me turn my hips, right? As we get better at Ultimate and we start throwing the disc further, we need that. We need to get more power from our body. If I only throw from my arm, then I'm going to hurt my elbow, I'm going to hurt my shoulder, and I'm not going to be able to throw the disc as far as I actually can. So to get the most power in your throw, you need to incorporate your whole body. You need to be turning from the hip, you need to be turning the shoulders, okay? And you actually need to be turning the head around. So as I'm stepping, I'm not looking forward the whole time. Okay, so as I'm stepping, I look back for a bit. As my hips turn, my head will turn with them, right? And then it snaps around. If I keep my head facing forwards, it's going to be really awkward. Okay, and it's actually going to put a lot of pressure on my neck if I try and keep my neck forward, especially on a huck or a pull. Okay, when my head moves, my shoulders move, my hips move, I want them all moving together, just like a golfer does. Okay, I want everything to be one fluid motion, and then the last thing I do is snap the wrist at the end to get a nice spin on the disc. Again, because we're playing Ultimate and we're not just throwing with friends, there's always going to be someone in front of me, so I need to step around them. How we step is up to you. There's some people that talk about your toe should point forwards, your toe should point to the side. It doesn't really matter. whatever's comfortable for you. To me, when I first started throwing, I realized this is a lunge, right? How do I lunge? I lunge with my foot forwards. If I go with it to the side, it's creating instability in the knee. So I like to throw when I'm throwing, throw it with my foot facing forwards. That to me is the best way to do it because it's a natural motion, which is the lunge. Okay? So as I'm stepping out, I get that nice throw off. Just like when you're throwing a baseball, football, or anything else, you want to be throwing at your target and releasing at your target. If I'm snapping and I want to be throwing it forwards and I'm snapping and releasing to the right, it's going to go to the right. Okay, the exception is if I have a different edge on the disc. If you watch some of my other videos, you'll see the different edges. For an inside out, it's going to be coming from inside of my body out and then moving back in because of the edge and the angle. And if I'm throwing it outside in, it's going to be moving from the out, coming back in based on the angle. So for right-hander, the inside out will move right to left. And for a right-hander, the outside in will move left to right. Exactly opposite for a left-hander. Okay, those are the different elements. When you first start throwing a backhand, just throw it nice and flat. You don't really need to worry about the edges. You'll notice them on your own. You'll notice that, oh, I tried to throw that flat, it turned over. Why is that? It's because there's wind, right? Without any wind, if you're throwing it flat, it'll stay flat. Unless it's a longer throw because the disc will tail off. I have other videos talking about throwing in the wind, so if you're not sure about how to do that, check those out as well. But this was a basic tutorial for throwing a backhand.